Welcome to Weather and Ag in Focus. It's about 1:08. I am Justin from the Lakes. I'm filling in for Bridgette Readel. She is out today, as is Dean Wysocki. But stick around, though. We got a great program for you today. We're going to be talking Lone Star tick here in a second and ticks in general, as well as at the bottom of the hour, we're going to have a professor on from South Dakota State talking about the new World Screwworm. So between those two topics, Addison, we should pretty much have everybody scared to death by the end of the program.
I'm already scared. I hate ticks.
No, and honestly, folks, we bringing both of these topics up. We just want to inform people, give you the facts of what we know right now, just so you can be better informed. I know some people think, at least on the New World Screwworm, it's far away. It's down in Texas and New Mexico right now, but it is kind of there have been more cases popping up, and hopefully it doesn't get up as far as here. On the other hand, with the ticks are a little bit closer, particularly the Lone Star tick. And again, we'll talk about that more in just a second. But we want to start out with the weather. How are we doing for weather here? Let's look at today. It is 74 right now in Fargo. We have a wind coming out of the west at about 10 miles an hour. Sunset, gosh darn it, look at that sunset all the way up to almost 9:30. It's 9:24 tonight, and a very low dew point, so it's pretty dry out there. I don't need to tell all the farmers on the field that. I couldn't believe it the other day. I had put something out in the yard that was wet. It was a tarp or whatever, and I'm telling you, within like seconds, it was dry, unrelated to the wind. It was just because of the dry weather. But that dew point's been nice and low, so it's felt really, really comfortable the past number of days. Looks like we'll start out here with Dean. We'll see what he has to say about the weather, and I'll tell you a little bit more.
It looks like we'll see a few more clouds as we head towards evening, but not a bad day with temperatures today into the mid to some spots upper 70s. And then we'll see some showers come in as we head into the late evening and especially into the overnight hours. We'll drop off into the mid 50s. And then scattered showers and thunder showers on Wednesday with highs into the upper 60s. And after some clouds in the morning on Thursday, we'll see a little more sunshine in the afternoon, breezy northwest winds, and temperatures again into the upper 60s. But finally, we make it back into the 70s for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The weekend looks pretty good in regards to temperatures with 70s. Still a little below normal for this time of the year, but all in all, not too bad. And total precip over the next couple of days looks to be about a quarter to a half inch widespread across much of the area. So some more moisture, and then our next chance of rain after this little system tonight and Wednesday looks to come in for the early part of next week.
Thank you for that, Dean. Yeah, I was looking at what it looks like out in Lakes Country, and again, for folks not familiar with who I am, Justin from Lakes Country. I'm out in Otter Tail County, Minnesota, and out there I know we're supposed to get some showers later this afternoon. But looks like it's only a 30% chance here in Fargo for that. But yeah, as you heard from Dean, a little bit more, about 60% chance of rain tomorrow. But yeah, we're staying in this, I would say mid 70s to high 60s weather pattern for a bit, at least the 10 days. I was just kind of looking a little further out here to see if I could see on the long term if we look to warm up at all. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking all the way into next Thursday. And again, it's just mid to high 70s for the most part in the next couple days. I guess not today, but tomorrow and Thursday will be in the 60s. But otherwise, it's all 70s from there on out. But yeah, pretty beautiful weather. And it looks like the weekend should be good from that standpoint, too. And not like crazy wind either. So good stuff to be had there. But yeah, as I mentioned at the top of the program here, excuse me, I mentioned about the ticks, and I wanted to talk about this last week when I was on because it's been something I've been hearing more and more about on the news. And I know that farmers already have a lot to think about out there with everything going on with the economy and so forth. But I think this is something I would be paying attention to if I was a farmer, particularly if I was a cattle farmer, because it might have some effect there down the road. Now, I mean, honestly, in some ways it could stabilize and some of the prices too, because I know they've been going up and up and up for a while. But so what is the Lone Star tick? Not to be confused with the longhorn, because I know the Bridgette's talked about that before, but the Lone Star tick is out of Texas, and it is notorious for something called the alpha gale syndrome. We're going to talk about that more in a second because there's a lot to be said for that alpha gale. But it's known to have very aggressive behavior. So it's, it'll kind of sit and wait for you, most ticks, right? But, for this tick, it will, it crawls and it's fast too. I've been watching some videos of these and it's really fast actually. But it's, definitely it's been more prevalent. Obviously, it started down in Texas, but it's been migrating its way up to our area for the past number of years. And right now I'm looking at the CDC hot map of this and just give you an idea. And this is why I bring this topic up, because I don't want people to think, well, this is far away. They can't handle our cold weather. Why are we talking about this? It's as close as Nebraska and the bottom corner of South Dakota. There's a teeny bit in Minnesota, and it's pretty prevalent in Iowa and also Wisconsin, and then also everything going down from there and then up the eastern seaboard, almost to the top of Maine. So this tick is a problem, right? Because I mentioned the alpha gale syndrome. You may not have heard of that, but I'm just gonna read you off the definition, and it's some of the stuff you're going to think today, and I'm going to try to, again, give you factual and sources on it and things like that, and not just opinion, but you're going to think this is science fiction. But alpha-gal syndrome, a tick-borne allergy to red meat, has seen an unprecedented surge in cases, with some reports citing a 10,000% increase in positive test results. Yeah, that's right, 10,000% over the last number of years. I'm going to play some clips here in a second, probably on the other side of the break here coming up. But just to say that, give you another stat that just blew my mind the other week, and this is in one of the clips. So RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, this is obviously hit Health and Human Services. They're thinking about this because, again, this is rising fast. And again, it's an allergy to red meat. And this isn't just some where you get a little itchy if you have some red meat. It's full anaphylactic reaction, hives, hard, breathing, stop breathing, etc., from alpha-gal. And right now, just to give you one example, just one little example, because RFK had rattled this off, and again, I thought this was AI. I thought this can't be right. 50% of Martha's Vineyard, for example, has alpha-gal positive. That is nuts. So in other words, don't be starting a barbecue restaurant out in Martha's Vineyard. But again, as you can tell by that number, 10,000% increase. It's getting, there's hundreds of thousands of cases of this now, and there's no cure for it. And that's why RFK had brought it up. And they're working on something for it. They don't know what, but again, it doesn't seem to go away. Now, there are some treatments for it to lessen it, supposedly. There's another clip that I have by Joe Rogan, who talked about a friend of his having it and did some sort of treatment. It went away for a little bit, or at least not as bad, and it came back with a vengeance after about a year. So this is a big deal. There's the other thing that comes up too is the genetically modifying or human engineering. You'll hear people call it of ticks and mosquitoes, and we'll talk later about the new World Screwworm. It's happening with all of these insects, and a lot of people believe that even the uptick, no pun intended, is because of more genetic modification of these ticks for whatever reason. Could be by the government. It was known back in the 60s. The government had done some, and this is from a declassified document, had released about 300,000 Lone Star ticks made with radioactive carbon-14. And it's because they wanted to, they were thinking about genetically modifying these. I don't know if it's for the alpha-gal or what have you at the time, but they were thinking about modifying these for weaponization. And the reason they injected the radioactive carbon-14 into them is because they were tracking their spread with Geiger counters. So they did this between 66 and 69 in the United States, by the way. And prior to this modification, these Lone Star ticks did not exist above the Mason-Dixon line. So again, this is these are facts. These are things we know that are happening. And so what do we do with this now? So we'll talk on the other side of the break. I'm going to start out with that clip from RFK when we get back and a couple other things. But don't go anywhere, folks. We'll talk about that, and we'll get an update from the American Ag Network right now. Welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus. Thanks for sticking around with us on your Tuesday. By the way, too, we're brought to you by Landmark Companies, your local leader in farm drainage. Give Blake Sunday a call and visit landmarkteams.com and ask about early order discounts. Precision drainage, proven results, and that's Landmark Companies, so you're going to want to keep them in mind. We were talking before the break about the Lone Star tick and how it's been creeping towards us here in the upper Midwest and is as close as a state away basically all around us. It gives you, if you get bitten by it, it gives you the alpha-gal syndrome or alpha-gal allergy, which is a meat allergy for both red meat, by the way, and pork. And it's a big deal. It's getting a lot of attention right now. And last week, I mentioned this a little in last segment, but last week, RFK was doing a symposium of some sorts, and he has, I know, Dr. Oz behind him and a handful of other people. And he was asked a question from a member in the audience, a press member, and this is that question and then how RFK answers it.
Liam Cosgrove with Zero Hedge. This one's for Secretary Kennedy. It's not exactly related to this, but it is a disease that seems to be increasing that prevents people from being able to reach a healthy nutrition, and that's the rise of this alpha-gal syndrome. That is a tick-borne disease. Last month, Joe Rogan and Congressman Tim Burchett were talking about the increase of it, and even these social media reports of farmers finding boxes of ticks on their farms. They're unsubstantiated, but I'm wondering if this is something you're looking into, whether you've reached out to those farmers and found whether they have alpha-gal, whether those tick boxes are real, whether they have alpha-gal. We do know that the World Economic Forum has hosted experts who do muse about using such a disease to reduce red meat consumption. Have you seen that? Have you heard of the reports that I'm referring to?
Our press team will get back to you on that one. We want to focus on today's announcement. Thank you for your question.
Oh,
Next one? Oh, do you want? Okay.
Answer really quickly. We are, last week I went to New Hampshire to announce a series of programs to address this explosion of alpha-gal, and we take it very seriously. One of the epicenters is Martha's Vineyard, where 50% of the adult population is now affected. It is really a devastating disease. You can't eat red meat for the rest of your life. We are looking at medications that can serve as both prophylactics and also potentially cures for it. We're funding those studies now, and we're working with the companies that are making those. We're also launched a major effort on tick control through a number of different strategies that address deer populations. The fact these the three ticks that are causing most of the tick-borne diseases all breed on deer, and we're looking at strategies for limiting their breeding capacity.
And any idea if the tick boxes, whether that claim is true?
We're going to move on from that. Thanks.
So what you heard there was, again, the answer to the question about, the alpha-gal, and, it's on RFK's, roadmap as far as medications, both prophylactic and otherwise. But a few things I wanted to kind of take apart in there. One was the boxes of ticks. So I did some searches on the internet, and I could not find a reliable source to admit that there is boxes of ticks being dropped. Now, if you look on X and other places, you will actually see them from aircraft being dropped and so forth. Again, come to your own conclusions. All this to say is that in the past, our government has dropped these ticks for, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, in the 60s for biological warfare research. I'm not saying that's what's happening now, but I'm just saying it's not that it has never happened before. So again, and the fact that it's been creeping up towards us, I mean, again, I don't think they're that fast. They are fast-moving ticks, but not that fast as far as migrating this many states south, or rather north, without some help. But the other thing I wanted to really clue in on with what the question was from that reporter is you heard the World Economic Forum and they wanting to curb our consumption of red meat. That is a factual statement, and you think some of this stuff is conspiracy theory just hearing it on its face like that. But I done some research, and this gentleman, and I'm just trying to find the clip right now. Let me just pause this real quick. So go back a little bit. So this guy, his name is Matthew Lau. Matthew Lau is. So seeing if I still have his. Yeah, here it is. He is a Taiwanese-American philosopher and bioethicist known for work on children's rights, human rights, neuroethics, AI ethics, reproductive technologies, and human engineering for climate change. Again, I'm going to repeat that last one. And human engineering for climate change. At the core of this, and again, I'm not, I'm just telling you what was with who this guy is and what he said, and I'm going to play the clip here in a second, is they want to human engineer these ticks with alpha-gal and other things, as we'll talk about with the new world screwworm, for climate change. And for climate change, what's that part? That part is so that we don't have as many cows. So we don't have as many, they think cow farts, they think everything, right, is contributing to the climate change. And so what this guy's saying in this clip, and it's awful chilling, and this is again at the World Economic Forum recently, and he was saying, that essentially, I'll just kind of summarize it. He likes red meat just like we do, but everybody's just not going to give it up. So we may have to human engineer and kind of help that along. I'm not kidding, folks. Take a listen.
I'll give two examples. So one is that people eat too much meat, right? And if they were to cut down on their consumption on meat, then it would actually really help the planet. But people are not willing to give up meat. Yeah, some people will be willing to, but other people, they may be willing to, but they have a weakness of will. They say, wow, this steak is just too juicy. I can't do it. I'm one of those, by the way. So, but so here's the thought, right? So it turns out that we know a lot about, we have these intolerance to, for example, I have milk intolerance. And some people are intolerant to crayfish. So possibly we can use human engineering to make it the case that we're intolerant to certain kinds of meat, to certain kinds of bovine proteins. And there's actually analogs of this in life. There's this thing called the Lone Star tick, where if it bites you, you'll become allergic to meat. I can sort of describe the mechanism. So that's something that we can do through human engineering. We can kind of possibly address really big world problems through human engineering.
How do you feel about that, cattle farmers? He just said that out loud. That's the quiet part, right? That they all feel about this. And I don't know. It was pretty shocking because I've heard about this and I thought it'd be a good thing to talk about and give you guys some of what I found on it. But again, they're not hiding what they're trying to do. I was trying to think of, there was one other one that I wanted to play for you. And this is the Joe Rogan one. I know that the reporter that asked the question to RFK had referenced it. So he was having a conversation with Tim Bridgette. So Bridgette is a senator, and they were talking about this. And just to give you just another one again. So this is, I guess, by playing these clips, I'm trying to show you this is getting to be very mainstream.
Ticks. Watch that thing.
The tick thing is nuts.
Yeah,
especially
because of meat, because of Gates.
Well, there's
Bill
boxes
Gates, not
people
Matt.
are finding. I don't know if this is true because I've seen many reports on it, but I'm just going to say what I saw. That farmers and ranchers are finding boxes of ticks on their property. Now, I don't know if that's fake. I don't know if someone's setting that up to pretend they found these boxes of ticks, but there's videos of these people finding boxes of ticks.
Now, what they'll say is they'll probably say they're sterile ticks and that we're planting them out there so we can diminish the population, is what they'll say. But anytime they try to mess with the balance of nature, it never goes right.
Is that what they're saying? This is
No,
where
just get ready.
That's what you
You're
think?
getting it right here.
I don't believe you have a right to go to someone's property and drop off sterile ticks.
No way in hell.
That's crazy either way. But I have a good friend of mine who got bit by the Lone Star tick and has that alpha-gal problem.
Yeah, a guy came out of my house yesterday looking at putting gutters up at our house. And that guy, he said, and I said, you did what? He goes, yeah, I can't eat any meat produced by a mammal.
Yes.
I was like,
yeah. So my buddy, he had it, and my friend Evan, so he had it for a little while, and then he did a bunch of treatments and got off of it and then started eating steak again. And he was fine for about a year and a half, and then it came back stronger than ever. And he just can't shake it.
It's been around that long.
Oh, yeah. He can only eat eggs. I mean, he's basically eating eggs and vegetables. That's all he's eating. And every time he tries to deviate, he has a horrible reaction. It makes, for people that don't know, it makes your body allergic to red meat.
Right. And who has got genetically made meat now?
Yeah, Bill Gates.
Bill Gates. Ticks.
So what you heard there was, again, that was Tim Bridgette and Joe Rogan talking about it. They mentioned Gates a few times. Again, he's a big investor in all these synthetic meats, is what they're saying. Again, that may be a bridge too far for some people. But, I agree with what Tim Bridgette said. I mean, ideally, if what they're doing is dropping these boxes with sterile ticks to decrease the population, amen, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about on the other side of the break with the New World Screwworm, with what they're trying to do with the flies is, right, introduce male sterile males into the population. And that's, by the way, how they eradicated it in the first place. So again, none of this stuff is new and none of this stuff is way out there. But when we get back from break, we're going to be talking with Russell Daly. He's an extension veterinarian and professor at South Dakota State University. And we're going to talk more about New World Screwworm and kind of what he's seeing, because he's out there dealing with producers and other veterinarians all the time. So go nowhere, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus. I'm Justin from the Lakes, filling in for Bridgette today. She'll be back tomorrow. I think she's at a South Dakota farm show or cattleman's show of some sort. But nonetheless, we're continuing on here with our show. So we have Russell Daly. He's an extension veterinarian and professor for South Dakota State University. He works in the veterinary and biomedical sciences department. He primarily works, as I mentioned before the break, with animal producers and veterinarians, but he also teaches at South Dakota State. And we're welcoming him now to talk about New World Screwworm. How you doing there, Russell?
Pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. I know that Bridgette had we had booked this a couple weeks back when things were kind of just starting. So why don't we level set for people and talk for a minute about what the new screwworm is, because it's been eradicated for a little bit, and some people might have forgotten. And for those that don't know.
Yeah. So New World Screwworm. It sounds like a parasite, and actually that's what it is. The worm part of it is actually the larvae from the fly that gets deposited in a wound in the infected animals. And it's really not something fun to think about or talk about. But these are basically flies that have made their way up eventually over years from down in Central America up through Mexico and now into South Texas. And the flies do their damage by actually laying their eggs in wounds on live animals. And the blowflies and the flies that we're used to in the summertime up here in the northern plains, the flies infesting the roadkill on the side of the road. That's the normal kind of blowflies that we have up here. But these are flies that like to seek out living animals' wounds, and the larvae develop into them, and then they actually develop into the screwworms, feed on the live tissue of the animals, and can be very very extensively damaging to the individual animals, if you can imagine.
Yeah, and I was reading about that first case from that farmer in Texas this is off of agweb.com for those folks that are listening. And he was talking about it. It eventually it came up in a calf, and that calf, I think it was in the navel. And
Yep.
he said that he saw there was some sort of sore in there. Started looking at it and kind of squeezed on it to see what was going on. Long story short, he finds out it's the screwworm, and starts treating it. Now, I found it interesting, and you being a veterinary professor, I'd be curious to see, because this was on agweb.com, how he treated it, which I thought farmers would be interested to hear. There was 6 things he did. He said he did something called wound coat, which is topical treatment, Dectomax, which is injectable, LA 300, which is noromycin, also an injectable antibiotic, penicillin, of course we know what that is, Standguard fly control, which is topical, and then Farnham Wonder Dust powder, topical. And I guess the moral of the story, the reason I wanted to read all those, so he did this, and he said that basically it resolved it 100%, and that calf is now out there and doing just fine. But would you agree with all that?
Yeah, and that's a good illustration of how we've got, well, on one hand, we got newer tools that we didn't have back in the 60s and 50s when we're trying to eradicate this in the first place. The Dectomax he mentioned. So that's an injectable ivermectin type of product. Our cattle producers would be really familiar with what that's all about. It comes in pour-on form, but injectable form can last a little longer in the animal. But then some of those other things, the fly control, the wound coat, and antibiotics. Those are things that would have been used back in the 50s and 60s on individual animals. So it's a combination of new tools and some of the older things that we've used forever in being able to treat these infested animals. And that story is a good example also of that this doesn't necessarily have to be a fatal thing in these animals. If anything's going to be uh, really severely affected by the screwworm, is going to be a young animal, like a calf like this. And the reason that these guys are vulnerable is that their navels, the umbilical cord hasn't really dried up yet in a newborn calf, and that's exactly what those flies like to hone in on as far as where to lay their eggs. So, in some ways, if you're still having calves, if the calves are still being born, that's a potential risk factor for that kind of infestation. If you have an older calf, unless they get a scrape or a scratch or a bite from some other animal, they're not gonna, and they don't have a wound. That fly needs a wound or some sort of uh, a entry point in to lay its eggs.
Now, you probably heard at the tail end, we were talking Lone Star Tick on the other side before I had you on. Obviously, that will survive up here. Will the fly survive up here? Now, it'll survive now, but I'm talking about season over season, or is it too cold for us, or for the fly?
Yeah,
rather?
it's too cold. It's too cold for them. The flies. Yeah.
So even if they did get up here for just a little bit, they'd be dead in a season.
Right, exactly. And that's we got to have some positive aspect of the cold, frigid winters we have up here. So that's one of them. But in historically, these flies never really got north of, say, Oklahoma, Kansas, even when there was a lot of problems back in the 50s and 60s, like I was mentioning. But interestingly enough, I was just reading this morning an older account, 1949, before they really got on with the sterile flies and some of that control. There was a screwworm in South Dakota. They brought a cow or an animal up from the infested area, and it got up here, and that could happen again. But it's not going to be something that's going to overwinter and be endemic or permanently living here.
Well, and that's what I was thinking too, is transitory, right? So if somebody brings a cow up from somewhere else, now at that point it could spread, right? If that was infected, then it could infect others as well, right?
Definitely, yeah. Other animals within the herd or surrounding, then it's a matter of those larvae that are feeding on the wound. They drop out of the wound, and then they become adult flies, and then they continue on their life cycle in other animals. So yeah, definitely it could be something that could spread laterally, if we would ever get an animal up here that was infested.
Now, right now, as of yesterday, so this wasn't whatever articles might have came out today, it said we were about at a dozen. Sorry, I said yesterday, Friday. We were at about a dozen, which began in Texas and now has spread in New Mexico. Anywhere else you're hearing that it is right now?
No, I haven't heard anything besides that. And yeah, that's current as of this morning here too, or just real recently that they reported 12. And it is interesting. You look at the map, and it's not like just one area. It's dispersed counties. So you have to figure that it's there in other places as well. It just hasn't maybe been detected. And what we haven't talked about, we're thinking about cattle, and that's our livestock population that's really at the important to us, but it's all sorts of animals that can be affected with this. So that's not to say there aren't deer down there, or rabbits that have been infested too, but they're, as you can imagine, pretty hard to find. Those wildlife species.
Well, and even it goes to, I thought this was where you were going with that. So I was reading on another ag website today that the FDA issued an emergency use authorization for generic, tell me if I'm pronouncing this right, nitaperim tablets for the treatment of New World Screwworm infestations in dogs, puppies, and cats. So they're worried about, pets, that way getting it down there as well.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely, and that's how we actually have found it once in a while up in the United States with some dogs that have been imported from other countries. And that's another example. Good, we have a lot better tools now than we used to in dealing with that. And the neat thing about those conditional use authorizations are that they're basically products that we're using right now on animals. I talked about the ivermectin type of product, and the farmer used Dectomax on that calf. That's the drug that you mentioned there is something that we already use on our pets for things like ticks and fleas and worms. So we have a lot of those things in the pipeline already. It's just a matter of the FDA saying, okay, now we'll approve it for use with screwworm infestations.
And we're talking, folks, with Russell Daly, an extension veterinarian and professor. He works for the Veterinary and Biomedical Sciences Department at South Dakota State University. One of the other things, you were talking about some of the newer tools, but as I was mentioning even again the previous segment with ticks, genetic modification. So that was the original tool with this, is genetically modifying the New World Screwworm to have sterile males, right? So that, and that's how they eradicate to begin with. I saw that they're starting to do the release of those down there as well. Is that kind of, has that been pretty, I mean, it was obviously effective enough to eradicate it, but do you think that'll be enough to squash it out?
Yeah, I think so. It's going to take longer. It's going to take more of those flies to make the effect and push this back down. I think, what we used back in the early 2000s was that exact same technology, but we're using it on a more constricted geographic area, say down in Panama, in Central America, where there's maybe 100 miles across, of land that you have to disperse the flies across. Now we're talking about South Texas, and boy, we're just talking about vast geography there. And so we're going to need a lot more of those flies. And the way they work is that the female fly only mates once in their life. And so if they mate with a sterile fly, then they're not going to lay any eggs. So that's how eventually the population is going to die out.
Can you stick around for one more segment with us?
I sure can.
You got some time? So we'll talk a little bit more here with Russell Daly, professor, veterinarian from South Dakota State University, on the other side of the break, and we might even have a call. So we'll with a question for you. So we'll do that and be right back. Go nowhere. Welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus. Thanks for sticking around with us on your Tuesday. I am Justin from the Lakes, filling in for Bridgette today. She'll be back tomorrow. And raring to go. And right now we're talking with Russell Daly. He's from South Dakota State University. He's an extension veterinarian and professor. And before the break, we're talking about New World Screwworm. And one of the things, too, Russell, that I was reading, you were mentioning that, we were talking about genetic modification of sterile males, and, so that, these females can't get pregnant. Now, on the other hand, the good news is the females can only get pregnant once. The bad news is, and reading, doing some research into this, they can lay up to 300 eggs at one time or 3,000 eggs during its 10 to 30-day life cycle. That's a whopper amount of eggs. And what they do, folks, is they burrow into the openings, including open wounds, the eyes, ears, and genitals, mostly of warm-blooded mammals. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Tremendously, I guess, fecund flies, that can lay that many eggs in one laying, and so lots of potential larvae.
Now, one thing that, we were talking also before the break, they'll probably squash this fairly quickly, but I'm just assuming, and the farmers listening are like, okay, what's your advice for me as a farmer right now? And I'm just going to take a stab at this. So if you're getting cattle from other states, particularly way down south, keep an eye on that, right? And if you do, scrutinize obviously if they have open wounds of any kind, particularly around their navel areas. But also the little tidbit I mentioned earlier about dogs and cats too, like that'd probably be honestly the more likely scenario up here, right? If somebody gets a dog or cat that's been born somewhere else.
Right. That's the bottom line too, is when you see anything unusual, especially any wounds that don't make any sense to be there, or they're expanding, getting bigger instead of healing up, that's time to see a veterinarian. And our veterinarians are really well tuned into this situation. Not that we expect to see any, hopefully, knock on wood, any of it up here. But like I mentioned, it could happen by an animal being transported up here, so from another area. The good news about the livestock and the animals we can control, I guess, their movements on,
Yeah.
within those areas, there are stop movement orders put in and quarantines, and so there aren't animals necessarily moving away from those zones in which it's been located. But as I kind of mentioned before, there's probably some zones in there that the screwworm fly is there, and we just haven't identified it yet. So being vigilant about animals that have come from different places for sure. And I always recommend, no matter what the situation is, you're bringing animals from down south, bringing animals from across the state line, or even across the county line. Those are animals that should be isolated and kept separate from your other animals for a while, until we know that there aren't going to be any problems we're going to be bringing in.
We got time to squeeze in one caller here real quick. Tom from Fargo has a question for you, Russell. Tom, what do you have?
Yeah, just real quick. So right now, this cannot mutate over to humans, but let's say on a ranch, he has a little kid, he's playing with a calf or a dog or someone that's got something that's got an open wound. Can the fly get in? The kid gets scratched. Can the fly get to the open wound on the little kid?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something we haven't brought up yet is it can affect people too, and it has down in Central America and in some of those locations. Not a lot. It doesn't happen very often, but it's possible. Just any warm-blooded animal, it could happen. Now, with us, we have a little bit more of an advantage of, we have a little irritation on our skin. We're going to be scratching it away and recognizing that it's there. Whereas, cattle probably aren't going to be telling us that, necessarily that they've got a problem, but, we can kind of get on it a little earlier. But you're exactly right. I mean, this is something, it's a potential human issue too. Not a high probability thing, but you're right. It could affect people too, and has in small numbers in other parts of the world.
Well, thanks for the call, Tom. Appreciate that. And Russell, just real quick, if somebody had a question off air and they want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, get me at sdstate.edu, our extension website here. Just do SDSU extension and look for my name, and you can get all my contact information there. would be happy to talk to anybody.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you joining us today. Thanks so much for this. And, well, hopefully this doesn't get too out of hand. But if it does, myself or Bridgette will probably have you on again. But thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And, folks, that's it for today. Bridgette, like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Weather looks good. It's decent out there right now. More of a chance for rain tomorrow, maybe a chance late this afternoon. Otherwise, the rest of the week, pretty much 70s and mid-70s. And so we're looking pretty good and dry for the most part, other than tomorrow for rain. So, join Bridgette tomorrow, and thanks for joining us today on Weather and Ag in Focus.